So this is your optical mixing project in your color journal. Optical mixing is a principle of art that is reliant not on physical pigment mixing on a palette or on a surface, but a mixing through your mind. Remember, color perception is the actual wavelengths, the color in front of you, but don't forget the job that your eye and your brain does to interpret those colors. So with optical mixing, you're relying more on the interpretation than the actual color in front of you. So why is this helpful? So whenever you're mixing colors physically together, two things occur. The color will drop in value that you're mixing, and it'll lose saturation. So anytime you mix two colors together, the value will drop and the saturation will drop. So sometimes that's a loss of brilliance. So whenever I put, let's say, a cyan circle over this yellow one, let me choose like a cyan, and I'm going to keep my my opacity here around 50%. And what you get a green, but it's a slightly lessened in saturation and a darker value. So sometimes what you want is more of a intense color to occur, and maybe this image is only seen from a great distance, like a billboard. In that case, the greater the distance, the more optical mixing would produce a more saturated color. So instead of doing the actual mixing of these two colors, you would do a series of very, very small and close proximity yellow and cyan dots to create the illusion of the green. Okay, so for our project, you're going to want to go back to your color inventory. It's probably easiest to just use your equal color chart that you created from your natural object and choose either the whole color scheme or maybe eight to 10 colors from this to use for your optical mix charts. So I'm going to use maybe about 8 colors from here. The format of this project is in 3 charts. So you're going to create a document in Photoshop that's around like a 5 by 8 inch. It doesn't have to be large. And remember, the larger your files are, the slower your computing power. So definitely keep this a little bit smaller. And when you're going to start, you're just going to create these background bars. And when you start, choose 3 background colors from your original color study. And make sure they're really different from each other. I'm sure you can even see in these 3 studies what my background color was, because it'll be the most context oriented, it'll probably repeat the most, and it's going to really drive that particular color scheme. So in this one, it was this purple gray. That was my background color. In the second one, it was this yellow green and a mid-value, mid-saturation. And then at the final chart, I started with this sort of very tinted rose pastel. Okay? And that's really important. Remember this too, when you move beyond these studies are just replicating real life situations. And your first layer of color is probably the most influential choice you can make as a designer or an artist. It's going to set the tone for the entire piece, okay? So by starting with these 3 very different tones, I guarantee you're going to come up with 3 different colors, or the appearance of 3 different color schemes. And that's your problem. Your problem and game that you're playing with this particular assignment is, how can I take the same 8 to 10 colors and make them look radically different in 3 different charts? So up here, I thought about low contrast. So I put the very similar valued colors together and grouped them. And I start patterning. It's really important that you repeat patterns in these. what that does is it starts to teach the audience what's going to occur next. And it also allows you to then utilize their expectation, let's say of this green, violet, and the red, brown, black. I can then interrupt it in different ways and place different colors in those patterns, and you will just accept it. So here there's actually a black and a brown. So this was a way of kind of getting these two colors together. Right here we went green, yellow, and there's actually a white that I assigned with the yellow so that it kind of blends, optically blends as just a light yellow. So it's a way of grouping your colors that in a way that makes sense. And the second one, I kind of grouped my pink and orange, and you start to optically mix them together. They started to affect each other, right? It's neither just that pink or just that orange. They start to come together as this tangerine color. That also kind of gave me this pattern that I took advantage of over here, and I sank two oranges that were actually not these at all, but you accept them as part of the pattern. So that acceptance of pattern, even though details have changed, is called constancy. So it's a really interesting principle because if you do create patterns, visual proportionate patterns, the viewer will start accepting whatever you give them. So you can change little details in that pattern, and it's a great way to bring a lot of harmony to your color use. So even though these are two different kinds of oranges, you accept them as the same pattern. We often think that the lighting has changed in that circumstance, but we still accept that it's some relationship to the pink and orange that I primed you with in this section of the pattern. In the last one, you can start to see I started playing with a little bit of the optical mixing to create new colors. So here, this is starting to optically mix as a green, but it's just that very light powder blue and yellow, closely linked and repeated. Repeat more than you think. I actually think that this needs to double for that illusion to be more effective. So if you want that kind of optical mix to happen, you can't just do it once. You really need to repeat a lot for the viewer to start to accept that blending, okay? And once again, the smaller I make this, the better the blend. So you can see how this is useful in circumstances like large billboards, distant images. Those things are great opportunities to take advantage of optical mixing. So for this assignment, I would like to just see you play with the proportion and scale of your color usage, but do not use any new colors, only your 6 to 8 to 10 colors you choose. Make sure you use every color in every single study. You can just diminish the use of some. So clearly I'm diminishing the white up here. I think I have I have two white bars in the top. Whereas down here, I've really increased the white usage, okay? So every color in every scheme, but alter the proportion and scale and see if you can come up with something that appears to be 3 radically different color schemes. Okay, good luck.